Not long after receiving HIMARS rocket systems from the US in June 2022, Ukraine began striking Russian commands, munitions, and supply depots. For the next few months, it seemed like every day there was news of a new strike on vital Russian targets. Those attacks then led to a massively successful Ukrainian counteroffensive in the next months that followed. But since then, almost nothing. Despite announcing that the US was giving even longer range rockets for HIMARS, we've seen virtually zero news stories about successful strikes. Why? What happened between 2022 and 2023? And while it's not going to protect you from rocket attacks, our sponsor, NordVPN, will protect you online in virtually every other way. I use it myself regularly when I'm doing research for these videos, especially on some sites that are more questionable. They protect you in a bunch of ways, like man-in-the-middle attacks by encryption, for example. Here, this tool can see I went to Nord's website, but when I turn on NordVPN, it has no clue. Other tools they include, like their threat protection, can protect you against a whole host of other things, like phishing, malware, and ransomware. Their dark web monitor lets you know if your passwords have been compromised, and a whole bunch more. And all of this is real easy to use. All it takes is a single click. And they're always highly recommended by tech and security experts. So, with Nord, you know you're getting the best. So go give them a try today at nordvpn.com/covert. With that link, you'll get 4 free months on a purchase of a 2-year plan. On top of that, as always, they have their 30-day money-back guarantee to ensure that you're satisfied with their service. If you're not, it means you can get your money back. So again, go check them out. NordVPN. So why is HIMARS not making the news? Why don't we see any large strikes on ammo dumps, supplies, etc.? There really have been no major confirmed HIMARS strikes for a long time. Part of that is definitely just operational security. With Western countries giving Ukraine longer-range weapons, like the Storm Shadow cruise missile, we don't know if a strike was one or the other. And Ukraine typically doesn't want to reveal what weapon it used, since doing so could give Russia some insight on what it has, in which areas, and therefore could focus on trying to find and destroy them. Certain clues like these could help narrow down its location. HIMARS GMLRS has a pretty long range, but it's likely used a bit further back from the front line to avoid being easily spotted. Also, it's likely preferable to be somewhere near a garage or somewhere you can quickly hide in after firing. So if you then cut out all open fields, it could give Russia a manageable number of locations to watch for to see if it moves again. So it benefits Ukraine to kind of keep quiet about which weapons they're using. But we do know Ukraine still is using HIMARS. There is still the occasional video coming out. Also, the Russian Ministry of Defense continues to claim it shot down HIMARS rockets every single day. For example, 7 on May 19th, 12 on the 20th, 15 on the 21st, 5 on the 22nd, 13 on the 23rd, 16 on the 24th, 8 on the 25th, and another 10 on the 26th. So that's almost 11 a day on average that they're claiming to shoot down. Now, it's obviously hard to know how accurate that is, or try to estimate the total number fired based on how many were shot down, but again, it clearly means that HIMARS rockets are still being used. If we assume those numbers are true, and all the rockets are being shot down, and use that average as a larger average since Ukraine has started receiving HIMARS, which obviously would have a huge margin of error, it means over 3,600 HIMARS GMLRS rockets fired. Now, this is the one figure that the US doesn't state when they're listing which supplies they're sending to Ukraine. Instead, it always just says they're sending additional ammunition for HIMARS. But going back, Russia is likely getting better at shooting them down. Air defense operators now have a lot of experience with them, figuring out how to spot them, adjusting their radar settings to track and engage them better, and so on. But what about that GLSDB, or the ground-launched small diameter bomb? It made a lot of news when it was first announced it was being sent to Ukraine. It's supposed to have double the range of other rockets, also with greater ability to maneuver to avoid air defenses. But we really haven't heard much about that either. The GLSDB is pretty much just a typical GMLRS rocket with the warhead swapped out for the small diameter bomb, which has the ability to glide. Unlike the GMLRS rockets that fly pretty much along a ballistic path, this has the ability to glide that gives it that almost double range. However, because it's gliding, that means it's flying a lot slower, and that makes it much easier for air defenses to shoot them down. It's also been advertised that it can use its ability to maneuver to attack targets from different directions, or even come around from the back of a hill and strike a target where it can remain undetected and therefore much harder to shoot down. But except for the far west, Ukraine is pretty flat. I even exaggerated the terrain here just so you can see it. It's flat, open, fertile plains is why they call it the breadbasket of Europe, as it's perfect for farming. So there really isn't a lot of large hills or mountains to mask a weapon approaching. But another reason why HIMARS hasn't been as successful is that Russia has been adjusting. Before, supplies could be shipped by train right to the front, and then distributed to frontline units from there. All they really needed was to be outside of artillery range. With HIMARS though, they've had to move those supply depots further back. It keeps them safe, but it really strains logistics. Now trucks have to travel much further to get supplies to the front. Now, instead of getting resupplies in an hour or so, it's now several hours. And this is going to make Russia more vulnerable during any Ukrainian offensives, as they don't have the ability to react quick enough. The Kharkiv offensive in September by Ukraine, where Russia couldn't get supplies and reinforcements fast enough to the front, forced them to have to retreat and lose over 400 towns and villages and more than 11,000 square kilometers. And then finally, I think it's worth the question as to why Russia has not been able to destroy a single HIMARS vehicle. They have claimed to destroy many now, but there hasn't been any videos or photos to prove it whatsoever. The main is that Russia is severely lacking in its intelligence gathering capabilities. In fact, they even still used film in their spy satellites up till 2015 with the final Yantar launch. And then, even today, they almost certainly only have 2 imaging satellites, Persona 2 and 3, but also we can actually calculate the resolution those can achieve. In the visible spectrum, around 500 nanometer wavelength, and having a 1.5 meter diameter mirror, that means they have an angular resolution of 0.084 arcseconds. Then, at their 700 kilometer altitude in orbit, the theoretical best possible resolution would be just over 12 centimeters per pixel. That though would be with a perfect mirror. There's also things like distortion in the atmosphere, which will further reduce resolution. So, depending on how well you think they manufacture mirrors and other instruments, its actual resolution is likely somewhere around 50 centimeters. For comparison, nearly everywhere you see on Google Earth is way better than that. If we compare that to the US, President Trump's tweet of a US spy satellite showed the imagery was about 10 centimeters, and if it had been directly above the site, it likely could have achieved around 5. So that would be 10 times better in height and width, so 100 times higher resolution. And this is a simulated comparison. So with this much lower resolution, combined with the fact that they only have 2 of them, really limits their ability to be aware of Ukraine's military movements, buildups, logistics, and so on. And with the believed Ukrainian counteroffensive approaching, HIMARS will play a role, whether it's directly by striking targets, or just the threat that they pose alone straining Russian logistics, and the fact that they lack the ability to be able to find and destroy them.